You ready to go?
We are live now, Warden Danielson.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Service Delivery Review Steering Committee meeting. A special welcome to all of our CAOs. Could we have a roll call, please, Mr. Rutter?
Sure. I apologize, I'm not well prepared here, so bear with me. Warden Danielson.
Present.
Councillor Moffat.
Present.
Councillor Roberts isn't able to be with us today. Councillor Kennedy.
Present.
Councillor Burton.
Present.
Councillor Ryle.
Present.
Councillor DeVolen.
Present.
And Councillor Schell.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. We respectfully acknowledge that the County of Haliburton is located on Treaty 20 Michi-Sauge territory and in the traditional territory of the Michi-Sauge and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We acknowledge a shared presence of Indigenous nations throughout the area and recognize its original Indigenous inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. Could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda for today? Councillor DeVolen and Councillor Burton.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that the June 8th, 2022 Service Delivery Review Implementation Steering Committee agenda be hereby approved.
All in favor? That's carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes of the March 23rd meeting? Councillors Kennedy and Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that the minutes from the March 23rd, 2022 meeting of the Service Delivery Review Implementation Steering Committee be hereby approved.
All in favor? That's carried. I don't believe we have any business arising from the previous meeting, so we'll go right into new business and the working group updates, starting with roads, bridges, and drainage, and Shannon Hunter. You're up.
Thank you, Warden Danielson and members of County Council. I will just wait for the Public Works managers to be brought in, if there's any present.
They're out fixing roads.
Okay, so I think we have Abby Armstrong is available, but it's okay. So for the month of May, the Public Works managers met together as a group of together working on a draft entrance permit policy. And in May, we met as a working group and they presented their findings. And collectively, they prepared a entrance permit policy that everyone felt that would be reasonable to adopt. So each Public Works manager will be presenting to their individual council to adopt this policy. It will be the same across the board with maybe a few minor things far as titles to positions and such. This will be a phased-in approach because we are hopeful that after this first stage, the second stage will be presenting a proposal that the administration of the entrance permit policy will actually be an upper tier responsibility. So that you'll see this being presented in the very near future. Another item that was brought to our attention was Regulation 185.22. We did have discussions regarding an automated traffic control system, and it was brought to our attention that a lot of you still require traffic control personnel to be in attendance of an automatic traffic control system. And so it was felt that it wasn't really advantageous to the lower tier municipalities. So I believe none of the lower tier municipalities are joining in on the RFP. The final thing that has been discussed is the master transportation plan. Samples have been provided. We have an intermunicipal sharing folders, and so those documents are available. The public works managers will be reviewing and working on this scope to present to the working group. However, we will be at a standstill until a procurement person is assigned at the county, because I believe this was one of the responsibilities for that position. So, or one of the responsibilities we recommended for that position, I should say. And that concludes my report.
Do any members of council have questions for Shannon? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive her report? Councillor Burton and Councillor Kennedy.
Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Service Delivery Review Implementation Steering Committee received the June 8th, 2022 Roads, Bridges and Drainage Working Group update.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Shannon. Next up is Building, Septic and Bylaw Services, and I believe Mr. Rudder is going to address that.
Yeah, so thank you, Warden Danielson. We had one meeting between the last steering committee meeting and this one, and on April 6th, and coming out of that meeting, CAO Hunter has actually developed and circulated a building and bylaw integration worksheet. The intent is really to determine, I guess, impacts on the organization if in fact any integration of the building department was pursued. So it would look at the number of employees in the departments, whether or not they're unionized, rates of pay, their inventory of fleet, and also identify processes that are integrated into other aspects of the municipality. And so to determine what would need to be, or I guess the impacts on the organizations if there was an integration. So I guess the only other thing that would have happened or will happen is a full updating of statistics for building and septic system permits, and so that the most up-to-date information is available as we move forward. Once all of that data is gathered and analyzed, it will be the committee talked about the possibility of reaching out to another community that has done a similar type of integration to see, in addition to the challenges we've identified, if there were others, and then how they actually addressed those. So we would then present that information to the steering committee at a future meeting.
Okay, are there any questions from council on building, septic and bylaw services? Or thoughts? All right, could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive Mr. Rudder's report? Councillor DeBolen, and seconded by Councillor Shell. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Shell. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Service Delivery Review Implementation Steering Committee receives for information the June 8th, 2022 staff report on the Building, Bylaw and Septic Working Group update, and that the working group be directed to proceed with the next steps as outlined in the report.
All in favor? That's carried. Next up is waste management, and I think Tricia is going to update us on that.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Warden Danielson. What you have before you is some notes from the 3 meetings that the Waste Management Working Group has had. They met April 6th, May 17th, and actually met yesterday. All of the lower tiers and the county will see a staff report coming forward probably at the end of June and sometime in July, perhaps, regarding the integrated waste management RFP document. The waste management staff have developed and drafted a scope of work for the RFP, and that will be coming forward to each of the lower tiers and the county for approval and release. So that's just an update on the integrated waste management sort of strategy. Other discussions at the meeting have included the food cycler program, and several of the lower tier municipalities have completed or undertaking a pilot program. There's some discussion by the working group about considering a joint program if it's determined that these programs will be continued beyond the pilot program. So again, some more integrated work on the food cycler program is a possibility. And I think sort of the large discussion piece has been the blue box transition. And I am sure that the steering committee have a lot of questions based on the AMO presentation this morning. The one thing I will highlight is the group has had extensive discussions within the working group, but also the managers themselves have been having a lot of sort of individual discussions and group discussions beyond just the service delivery working group. I think the one thing I just will highlight is that there are still a lot of unknown details about the Blue Box transition program and specifically the specifics of the program. I think probably what I might do is I know that most likely the steering committee have a lot of questions. And you can see on the screen, we have several of the managers joining us today, and they're the ones that have all the knowledge and specific background information to answer your questions. So Warden Danielson, if I will leave it up to you as to how you'd like to proceed on this specific discussion point.
Well, it was obvious from the presentation that we received this morning that there are a lot of questions and likely concerns that we'll have for some time going forward. But I would look to members of council to see if you have specific questions that you would like to ask any of the staff members as a result of this morning's presentation or the report that we've received. Councillor Moffat.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I'm going to just ask sort of the same questions that I asked this morning, and one of them is from the presentation we had from the Mr. Hargreaves from AMO. Sounds like the producers are in the driver's seat, and that the townships may have to make staff and fund some choices in the middle of a budget cycle that in a very short timeline. So just looking for confirmation or telling me I'm right or wrong on that, and what folks are thinking about exactly those things.
See the wheels turning.
Yeah, Melissa, did you want to answer this part or?
Sure, I can jump in there. There's a significant shift in how services are being distributed now, and the role of the municipality has changed to becoming a service receiver to becoming a service provider. Essentially, municipalities are now looking to be contractors to these pros, these producer responsibility organizations. And just to clarify that, a producer responsibility organization is an organization that has come together to represent a bunch of companies. So Pepsi and Kraft and Kellogg's have all gotten together, and they have put all of their funding into an organization who's now administering the program on their behalf. So they're sort of the pro is a caretaker for these services. But that transition, like I say, where municipalities now are becoming service provider or could choose to become service providers or not. So instead of where we're contracting with someone like Mid-Ontario or Waste Connections, now we are actually the contractor to that pro. So that's where they do become the driver's seat now, because they get to determine the scope of work and what you get paid and what the conditions of the work are. So that's a real shift that we're seeing, and that does put them in the driver's seat.
Go ahead, Councillor Moffat.
So is it correct to say then that that with that shift, then that municipalities will, and this is the fear that we've had from the very beginning, is it fair to say that municipalities are now going to bear the brunt of additional workloads, possibly staff complements, costs, etc. Because the gentleman this morning said that the producers are obligated to do the same work that's being done by a landfill. And I said, well, in Algonquin Highlands, and there's 5 of them in Dysart, there's 4 in Algonquin Highlands. So it's this kind of a silly example, but is the truck from Sony going to go from landfill to landfill to landfill picking up TV boxes? And that's what I can't get my head around. And I've asked these questions at the annual conferences as well as this whole program was being developed, is exactly what it means for municipalities on the ground. So it's feeling more and more that the program is being shoved at us, and wherein there will be a forced cost to absorb the work that needs to do to keep the program running. So I'm just wondering if that's the feeling that you folks have, being in the trenches as this program has unfolded. And Melissa, maybe you can answer that.
Sure. So municipalities will have a choice to make as to whether they want to provide services or not. So we're not being mandated. There's nothing in the regulation that requires a municipality to provide any services, and we certainly could choose not to. But choosing not to has some implications, and choosing to has some implications. And those are some of the things that each of us will bring back to councils to look at. What are the concerns and what are the benefits of going in either direction with that. And the program, the change is designed that producers will be responsible for all the costs. I guess the question is at what cost to the services that the public receives, and that's where it's different. So, and I'll just also answer the quick question about Sony driving a truck from one to another is an interesting example, because instead of that, imagine it's Sony and it's Electrohome and RCA, and they all pool all of their money in together, and they hire a contractor to drive a truck around on all of their behalf. That's essentially what a pro is. So a pro is working on behalf of a large group of producers who are all pooling in to say, okay, we're going to fund this system, and we're going to fund an organization to manage it on their behalf as well. So there's a lot of players at that level as well.
All right, if I can just jump into, I think there's a distinction to be made between the transition years, which for us would be 2024 to the end of 2025, and then post transition. The producer responsibility organizations definitely have a desire to kind of keep status quo in the transition years. So they want us to remain in the game and remain with our current hauling contracts to move recycling materials from our respective depots or waste drop-off sites to our respective MRFs that we use for material recovery. Post-transition, we may see changes in how that haulage were to happen for blue box residential materials only. But we always have to think that there's 2 phases to this project. It's not an overnight change. There will be a bit of a transition period for all of us.
One of the concerns that I had was the differentiation between residential and for instance, our own facilities, like a library, and how we're going to keep track of what comes from our own facilities and from the public, and what challenges that brings for you.
That definitely is a challenge around what's considered ineligible sources of blue box materials based on the regulation. Some of those ineligible sources have previously existed. So the 4 lower tier municipalities, as we've reported, our waste diversion data to the Resource Recovery and Productivity Authority. We've had to do a calculation to take out what is the ineligible sources traditionally considered commercial. In the new world, where the producer responsibility organizations are perhaps funding all of the residential blue box materials, they do not want to see those ineligible sources being included. We are working extensively, the 4 municipalities together, to figure out a way to maybe survey our commercial sector to figure out how much blue box materials we're receiving from the commercial sector, and also working with some of our industry associations to get a better sense of how we can gauge the tonnage of that material that perhaps we're receiving at some of our larger sites. So it definitely is a work in progress on the ineligible sources, both being commercial and our community center arena type materials as well.
I think I saw Councillor Kennedy's hand and then Councillor Rail.
Thank you. And I waited till this afternoon so I get maybe some answers from on the ground. In the Q&A that was provided in the document that CMO put out, I got a couple of alarm bells went off on the what are the thresholds, e.g. the number of households and population that will be considered in a catchment. And the response was transportation can follow arterial roads. I don't think they're going to go to Coagama Lake, Councillor Moffat, or to Canisius Lake. Collection of vehicles can be serviced from 1 or 2 hub areas. That was another big alarm bell that was talked about this morning. So arterial roads, is it going to be Carnarvon, Halliburton, Minden, and that's it because they're provincial highways? I'm not sure. And then some of the other ones, but just some kind of an idea of what I know they got County Halliburton. So how is that determined? There's size of Prince Edward Island, so just that's good. So, and no people. There's some logistical issues here.
The regulation does specify that the producers, for depot-only communities, which 3 of us are and 1 of us kind of is, they have to provide the same number of depots for recycling as there are currently for garbage. So Dysart has 5 depots. 5 depots will need to be maintained during transition and post-transition. How the pros are able to collect those materials is ultimately for the pros to figure out. But under the regulation, we should all maintain or retain the same number of depots that we currently have in place for the drop-off of recycling and garbage. If you get out of the game, if you choose not to be a service provider, where that recycling depot is becomes a different question. And that is something councils will have to make decisions about if they're getting out of participating. Your recycling drop-off could be somewhere different than your garbage drop-off.
If you don't mind, I'll just add in there. So the catchment that they were talking about this morning, that actually is applying to curbside collection. For depot, it's by municipality. So it's a little bit different.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Kennedy?
They don't mention anything about depots. They just talk about hub areas in the Q&A, but it may well be within the deeper in the document they don't have access to. Thanks.
Councillor Real?
Yeah, I got a question on, I understand the segregation between the what would be classified as commercial, and that would include municipal, along with the difference between that and residential. Now, I'm going to assume for the sake of argument that it's mostly for cost purposes, that is to say for credit. Now, the question I'm asking is what happens to the commercial stuff? Does it get picked up as well and we don't get credit for it, or do we pay for it, or how does it work? Because if we have to have a second source to pick up the commercial and ours, this is not going to make things easier.
So it's complicated. So during transition, CMO or Circular Materials has proposed that if you blend your eligible sources, residential, with ineligible sources, being commercial, you automatically will take a 25% reduction in the funding they would provide to you. Regardless of what percentage your commercial sector truly is, it's a 25% reduction. We feel that number's kind of been set to discourage the blending of materials, but in theory, during transition, the blending is something that could happen. Post-transition, I think Circular Materials' opinion is that the materials will need to be separated, and that will become a council decision about whether whether municipalities want to provide recycling drop-off options to the commercial sector, or whether it's subsidized by the property tax base, well, as a fee for service. There's a big discussion for councils to explore around the commercial aspect of recycling. I think it's safe to say that we are all trying to get a better sense of how much commercial recycling we're actually all managing at the moment. We don't really have a good sense of that number, to be very frank.
Go ahead, Councillor Rao.
So basically, we're talking here credit and dollars. That's basically what we're talking about here. That the pros don't want to pick up the cost of things that don't necessarily belong to them and for which they're not technically liable. Having said that, that still leaves us with a pile of stuff, and that stuff is there and has to be got rid of. So the question I guess I'm saying is, I understand is there going to be a fee? Or do we have to come up with a completely separate place to dispose of that? Because that's going to be the issue, is how do you, with the logistics of this whole thing rather than the cost. We can track the tonnage, that's not a problem. In compactors, that could be a little more complicated because you're going to have to now process your residential cardboard first, and then you're going to have to do your commercial one second. And I guess we'll worry about that when we get in the trenches. But at this point in time, once it's been baled or whatever we're doing with it, the commercial stuff can be disposed of, I'm assuming, whether it's cost or not.
I think we would all anticipate there would still be a market for blue box materials generated from the commercial sector. There would still be material recovery facilities that would be able to receive that material. The producer responsibility organizations are simply complying with the regulation, which very clearly stipulates the new blue box regulation is for residential eligible sources. There is hope that the province will update some of its existing industrial, commercial, and institutional recycling regulations. So maybe down the road, we will see more programs or more funding to support the recycling of that material. But during post-transition, and maybe even during transition, there's the possibility that there would be a cost to someone to recycle commercial recycling, to collect it and process it.
Any other questions on waste management? I'm sure we'll have a lot more as we go forward. Go ahead, Tricia.
I think the other thing I just wanted to highlight for the steering committee is municipalities have until June 15th to communicate their comments to CMO. And the managers have put together a very detailed letter with feedback, with concerns to send off to CMO. And I did want to make County Council aware of that the managers have done an excellent job of working their way through this master service agreement. And the other thing to communicate is we know there are changes coming with this master service agreement, but no one has seen those changes yet either. So it's, as I said, there's a lot of change happening from week to week, and staff have done a great job of trying to stay on top of it. But I did want to highlight, they put together, I'm trying to think how many pages, 4-page, 5-page letter detailing all their concerns section by section with this agreement that has proposed. So I did want to highlight that and thank them for that, because it's an excellent letter sort of raising all of these concerns, which we've heard today as well.
Thanks for that. Councillor Moffat?
Thank you. Can you confirm if those are the comments that have to be supplied by June 15th or provided by June 15th to CMO?
If I may, yes, I believe that's the deadline, is June 15th for those comments.
Okay, so our municipality is going to see the letter, or like what's the process for members of council to participate or see the letter or have any comment on it, or talk to me a little bit about that.
So if I may, Warden Danielson, the managers have drafted the letter, circulated it to all of the CAOs for review and comment. And the CAO suggested that we endorse the letter as well, so that it's just coming from the managers, but also having the CAO signatures on it as well. I don't know, I can defer to Mr. Rutter if there's a different process that we should be taking on that.
Actually, that would be up to each individual municipality, how you chose to deal with that. So.
And the timing is not great. I mean,
That was kind of my point.
Yeah, it would be almost impossible for that to come to each of the councils to review and add any comments, I would think, at this point in time. Any further thoughts on that? Well, thank you for that. I know that you're all working hard to try and represent the concerns that we've all got. And as I said, it's complicated, and I'm sure we'll all have questions and be maybe even banging our heads on the wall a little bit as we go forward with this. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the waste management report? Councillors Kennedy and Ryle, thank you.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Service Delivery Review Implementation Steering Committee received the June 8th, 2022 Waste Management Working Group update for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Next on the agenda is planning services, and we shall hear from Angie Bird.
Thank you, Warren. As the committee knows, we have been working, our last two meetings have been basically on harmonizing our fees, the planning services fees. And as we've outlined in the report, I'm happy to advise that it looks like all of our consolidated fees will be adopted at least by July. It's anticipated. Sorry, I'll just wait for the planners to get here. And so we did schedule a meeting for April to discuss our next endeavor, which is the pre-consultation process. But we wanted to allow the planners to have an opportunity to meet separately to just to talk about the process and bring a recommendation to the working group. So the planners hadn't had an opportunity to do that. So we postponed that meeting. And since that time, the planners have met, and I understand they do have a process that they are going to present to the working group. So our next meeting will be scheduled hopefully in June. So that's where we are at. That's the end of my report.
Any questions from council on the planning piece? Hearing no questions, thanks very much, Angie. And could I have a mover and a seconder to receive your report? Councillor Shell and Councillor Burton.
Moved by Councillor Shell, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Service Delivery Review Implementation Steering Committee received the June 8th, 2022 Planning Services Working Group update for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Okay, I think Tamara is going to give us the integrated digital strategy update.
Okay, I think Mike March is going to join us as well.
Okay.
Hi, Mike. Okay, at our most recent meeting, we decided that our group has been doing so well and has an ongoing mandate in terms of working collaboratively and looking at things like any collaborative initiatives as they come up on a regular basis, setting budgets, looking at policies and that sort of thing. We've agreed that this group would become a permanent working group and will look at meeting quarterly unless we need to meet on a more regular basis for a specific project. And we're going to hand over management of the working group over to Mike March. So he'll be reporting on this from now on, and I'll just be participating. At this point, our first quarterly meeting has just taken place on Monday. And we're talking about cyber insurance requirements, records management project to look at where we can go for next year, and the possibility of an IT digital strategy to formulate a future roadmap for IT needs for the whole county and municipalities. So I'd like to hand that over to Mike if he would like to add any details to that, or if you'd have any questions to that.
I don't think I have too much to add. I think you did a good job explain it, and then with the rest of the details in the report, but I'm happy to answer any questions anybody may have.
Any questions from council on the IT digital strategy? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Councillor Dvolan, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Dvolan, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Service Delivery Review Implementation Steering Committee received the March 23rd, why don't we call it the June 8th, integrated digital strategy update for information purposes.
All in favor?
Catching that, Mike.
That's carried. Next on the list is Human Resources Coordination, and I think Trisha's going to give us a verbal update.
Unfortunately, there's not too much to update since the last steering committee meeting. At that meeting at the end of March, the steering committee did endorse the municipal councils to develop or to seek direction to develop a joint RFP for brokerage services. So the working group has not yet proceeded on that. So we have not had a meeting since the last steering committee meeting, but that is still on the list of things that we will be moving forward with.
Thank you. Any questions for Trisha? I've got to say, Trisha, you're a little bit hard to hear. You're breaking up a little bit, but we did hear what you said. At least I did. Did everyone hear that well enough? Okay. Next is economic development, and I don't think that there's any update there. We've got our economic development director in place, and he's working hard with our tourism manager, and we'll hopefully see those results as we move along. Next is collaborative procurement, and I think Mike's going to give us an update on that.
Yeah, thanks, Warden. We did, as we've described, it feels like a number of times, we've had some difficulty recruiting for this position. So we did take a report forward to the committee of the whole meeting in May at County Council, and suggested a bit of a different model where we don't necessarily recruit someone with the full set of skills and training that we would ultimately be looking for, but hire someone hopefully that's in the area already who has the right skill set that we could then mentor and provide some training to over a couple of years. So Committee of the Whole requested that we revisit the job description to see if the position could incorporate responsibility for grant writing, as has been done in Dysart. So I did bring this subject up with the CAOs at our last two weekly meetings, and I would say that the consensus of the group was to recommend that the position remain focused solely on procurement. When we drilled down a little deeper into the Dysart position, it was clear that they had included a number of different tasks in that, including grant writing and administration of those grants, procurement, implementation of a purchase order system, and lease administration for their buildings. So there are a number of other tasks that they carry out in that role that I guess that capacity exists within other departments at the County of Haliburton. So it would be difficult to consolidate all of those. My primary concern, though, with amending the job description is really about workload. And our hope is that this position really does support all the local municipalities, including Dysart, in procurement activities. And if we were to add grant writing, my concern is they would become solely focused too much on county work, and it would leave not enough time to be assisting the local municipalities the way the position was originally envisioned. So we would like to proceed with the original plan, or we're recommending we proceed with the original plan. That would give us the organizational capacity. We'd have the procurement coordinator to do a lot of the administrative work and progressively do more and more of the procurement work. But it would also allow us to have the professional guidance or mentorship for the position provided by a professional from, we're hoping, another county nearby. We've had preliminary discussions with the County of Peterborough, and they seem quite willing to provide that service. I guess a little more context. We have been doing a lot of RFPs. Most of them, or many of them, coming out of the service delivery review. The community safety and well-being plan, that wasn't part of the service delivery review, but it was a large one. Economic development strategy, public works have been doing a number of collaborative procurements. We're about to release an EMS master plan with elements that will support the development of fire master plans if and when your municipalities want to pursue those. We've just spoken about the integrated waste management study. We've done a development charges study and a short-term rental review. Those are really big jobs, and being done by people who aren't necessarily procurement professionals. They do well, but they're not necessarily procurement professionals, and so it has placed a strain on our resources that really just isn't sustainable. And so looking forward and seeing a number of larger procurements that will be done in the next year or two, transportation master plan, fire master plans, there could be a number of them, an integrated digital strategy, broker services that Tricia just talked about, the potential for HRIS software for at least one of the local municipalities and the county. There are a number, and we really, at least I speak for myself, I guess, I really feel like having the support there with a procurement professional would really be helpful. And I guess the savings of those collaborative procurements are really intended to offset the costs of service improvements that are like our economic development department that you mentioned, our procurement position itself, but others as well. And if we don't have those savings, then they'll just be additions to the tax levy. So we're hoping to move as quickly as we possibly can to fill the position as it was originally described and or proposed. And so I guess unless there are questions, that is our recommendation.
Questions, Councillor Rao?
Just a question, Mike. Is this something that would have to be brought back up at county council so you can get clear guidance, or are we good with doing that here?
Through you, Warden, I guess the recommendation is actually to recommend that this committee recommend to county council. So ultimately, it would go back to county council, unless directed otherwise. If committee was prepared to provide that direction today, we could start the process sooner. But the resolution was to recommend to county council that this be considered.
As you know, we've heard a certain amount about this and the challenge associated with it already, and I think we anticipated that we'd be getting a recommendation like this. Do you have a question, Councillor DeVolin?
No, I was just to make clear my support.
Councillor Kennedy, did you have a question or comment?
No, just after if staff are recommending this, and I can certainly see the merits in moving forward as recommended by the CAO. No problem.
Did you have further question, Councillor Rao?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, will we be bringing this up at our next meeting, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive this report and the recommendation? Councillor DeVolen and Councillor Rao.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Service Delivery Review Implementation Steering Committee receives for information the June 8, 2022 staff report on collaborative procurement and recommends to Haliburton County Council that staff be directed to re-advertise the position, opening the opportunity for candidates who are not fully qualified but who are willing to take the appropriate training to fulfill the mandate in the long term, and that it be recommended to Haliburton County Council that staff be directed to negotiate a draft agreement with a neighboring municipality for procurement support and mentorship services.
All in favor? That's carried. Did you have a report on coordinated legal services or no?
No, that item has been deferred by council or I guess classified as not a priority, and so we haven't pursued that at all.
Okay. And the same is the case for communications for now?
That's right.
Okay, then next is fire services. And back to Tamara.
All right, I think that a couple of the chiefs anyway are going to be joining us here. There we go. Okay, well, the group continues to meet. I think at the last steering committee, they were tasked with a few different items to look at, being the position that's being discussed, whether it was CMC or training or a mixture thereof of different components. Also, they were asked to look at the burning bylaws to see if there are any opportunities for more consistency across the municipalities. As well as there was a start to discussion around fire master plans. At this point, the group has asked or suggesting that we perhaps take a pause on the position discussion for the moment, partly because we don't have a full complement of the full-time chiefs at the moment, and that we're heading into lame duck, and it's not likely a budget item at the moment that we need to rush on. But one interim step that we've already agreed to actually move ahead on, which we hope you're pleased with, is to piggyback onto an agreement that Algonquin Highlands has for a tabletop exercise in October. So all the municipalities would get the same tabletop exercise provided by the same company, learning the same language and methodology and so forth. The other thing is Algonquin Islands has offered to host basic emergency management training for our members of the OCs. They feel confident that they'll have a new burning bylaw ready to implement for the next burning season, April 1st, 2023. And are also looking at the fire master plan and community risk assessments. And Mike Rutter noted that the county has included a component in their EMS plan to provide some data that will be useful for the community, for the local plans. So at that, I'd like to hand it over to Michael French to add anything in there, as he's offered to speak for the group today.
Afternoon, everybody. As Tamara presented, we've been moving forward quite rapidly with the three specific items. I just want to highlight a couple of them, specifically the emergency management. With having the emergency management training plan and the tabletop done by an independent consultant, it relieves a lot of the workload on the fire chiefs going forward. We originally spoke about having a full-time CMC, and after a lot of discussion amongst the fire chiefs and the CMCs, we felt having this consultant come in and do a half day of training and a half day tabletop, which is required by the Emergency Management Ontario, it relieve a lot of the duties we required, and we'd be able to continue doing the compliancy with not near the workload we did have before. So one of the main goals of having the one company do it, emergency management and training, who we were going to use it at Algonquin Highlands, and as Tamara said, the other townships in the county will tag on with that, is we're able to get a discounted price because they're going to be done 5 days in a row instead of them having to have expenses from traveling from Barrie. each day. They're able to leave their representative up here and stay overnight and go to the following township or county. So that did save us a lot of money through the service delivery, approximately $500 per township and county plus incidentals. What it does do is we're going to, in speaking with the CMCs, is it's going to be done yearly, and we're going to start right from basic. So this year we're meeting with the gentleman at our county fire chiefs meeting July 4th, and we'd like to start with all the paperwork's required, how you set up your EOC, but each individual township in the county will all be trained to the same and do the same tabletop. So we'll all be interchangeable. So if we had a large event and we need somebody to come in and fill a specific role in EOC, one of the neighboring townships or the county could actually slide over and do that for them. Everything can be consistent, and it's going to be more uniformity for everything, having the one company doing it. So our ultimate goal is, over a 5-year period, is to do this each year, with culminating after 5 years with a full scenario that we would do a live scenario, maybe of a plane crash at the airport or a power outage. But there's a long-term plan to this, and I think that's important. And us all doing it together is important too. The next thing that Tamara spoke about was burn permits. We have met prior to, or as we are now, there's 4 different burn permits regulations going across the county, which creates a lot of issues. I know alone for us in the Algonquin Highlands, when you go up probably 35, you're within Algonquin Highlands, you're in Minden Hills, and you're neighboring Dysart. So you got 3 different regulations. Somebody's sitting on one side of the lakes looking across, and it's against their regulations, but not against the Algonquin Highlands regulations. So I think uniformity is very important. So as the mayor stated, we will have a plan coming forward to council for the next burn season for that. And the last thing I want to highlight is the master fire plan. We are working on doing that, making it more accessible for the townships. I know that Tim Waite, along with Mr. Rudder, they've put in their master plan for the EMS is NFPA 1700, and that's for community risk assessment. And it's required by all townships to have that for June of 2024. And with their people doing it with EMS, a lot of the numbers will be collected for the townships to do their fire master plan if they so choose to, at basically saving money because the numbers are already collected for a lot of it. So it saves us doing twice. So that's going to make a big difference having this included in the EMS master plan. So the other change we've made internally is the county fire chiefs meet the first Monday of every month. We now include EMS chief Tim Waite to all the meetings also. That improves our CMC, but also for the first part, anything that would involve EMS and fire we deal with. So in that aspect, I think that's a real positive move going forward. So at this time, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to bring them forward.
Thanks, Chief French. Sounds like there's some good work being done by the fire chiefs. Councillor Rael, you have a question?
I do a whole bunch of interesting things. I can't get over the fact that the master fire plan is something that we're going to be doing countywide. That's awesome. Just plain awesome. Having said that, have you got an idea when you would have a draft prepared? I realize 2022 is not an option, but within the next, say, 12 to 18 months?
In response to that, the actual master fire plans will still be done at township level. The EMS plan is going to be done at county level, and it'll be at the choice of the township. But we will be using the information gathered at the county level.
And there could be an opportunity to work collaboratively on the RFPs and perhaps a joint consultant or things like that, as well as right now it's just at the initial investigation stage of costing and stuff like that.
Correct.
Other questions on fire or emergency response? Well, thank you, gentlemen. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive this report? Councillor Shell, seconded by Councillor Rao.
Moved by Councillor Shell, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Service Delivery Review Implementation Steering Committee receive the June 8th, 2022 Fire Services Update for information purposes.
All in favor? That's carried. Before we adjourn, I thought maybe we should have a brief discussion about the work schedule going forward. You know, I know that we're heading into summer schedules and everybody is a lot busier. Obviously, some things are going to be on hold, and as we wait and see about getting a procurement person in place, we've also got summer holiday schedules to deal with. So, as well as lame duck rapidly approaching, do we want to see a slowdown in work? Should we just continue with the dates that have been set? I guess I'm looking for thoughts, and Mike, you might want to speak to that on behalf of the CAOs.
No, I mean, summer is always a difficult time to do a lot of meeting anyway, and of course with council being lame duck, at least county council, I'm not sure what all of the individual councils will be, but you know, that will add a complexity for sure. So some of the work is almost administrative in nature and can carry on. You know, the RFP for service or for integrated waste and some other initiatives that are already moving forward can continue to, but if the steering committee is comfortable not meeting, then you know, I think that would take a load off the CAOs and staff.
I'm looking for thoughts from council. Councillor DeVolen.
I think to follow on the heels of Mike's comments, those things that are administrative in nature and build on the good works that all the staff that are here and across all the municipalities have done. Things that go beyond that, you know, technically, most of the councils are going to end up in lame duck in August, but some of these big substantial pieces that might come back out of this, I would say as a council at the end of its term, we've lost our moral authority to do it. That really, to give staff that I think across all the municipalities that are tired and to catch up on the things that they're doing otherwise, including hiring and those other things, and that it's the great reset happens for the next term of council. Just my opinion.
Thoughts from other members of council? Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, I'm kind of in two minds. I do appreciate that, and speaking certainly an awful lot to Angie, that it is taking a ton of time for staff in a time of year that is busy with holidays and just the busyness of the summer season. But at the same time, there's some really great momentum that's been achieved, and I would almost rather let the CAOs govern the pace of the meetings based on what's happening within their own worlds, as opposed to us who don't work in their world saying you shall and you must, and like, let's keep something moving. And to Councillor DeVolen's point, maybe the stuff that's in progress keeps moving and the other things are a little slower.
Yeah, I really take your point about the momentum. I hate to see us lose the momentum, or for things to take a different direction because we've paused on things. But you know, I just have seen that things are. Everybody has been working so hard, and people are overworked and tired. And you know, I don't want to put any more pressure on anybody than necessary. Councillor Royale, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I think I echo just what everybody else is saying. I mean, the momentum has been awesome, and where the CAOs have got the time, I have no idea. Like where you guys found the time to get done what you got done is just mind-boggling in itself. And to take on anything new, to me, would probably be more than you could handle. But if within the minds of the CAOs, and I know sometimes when you get something started and you stop it, it's almost like the wheel rusts right up, and then you've got a real problem trying to get it going. So if the CAOs felt that there were certain issues that they would like to finish off, then I think that choice should be theirs. And within that, I would accept whatever decision that they make.
All right, well, I'm hearing that we will leave it in all of your capable hands. To all of you CAOs, I know there are some things that are in the works, and they will continue, and we will reconvene when you're ready for us to do so, and we're able to respond. Any further comments, questions, or thoughts before we adjourn? Councillor DeBolen.
Just a huge thank you to all.
Yeah, absolutely. You've all done a great job and continue to do so. And I don't think any of us can say enough about how much we appreciate your work. Even you, Mike. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you to you all. You really do a great job for us. And having said that, before I break out in tears, could I have a movement to adjourn, or move to adjourn? Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that the June 8th, 2022 meeting of the Service Delivery Review Implementation Steering Committee now adjourn.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you soon.